He said he knew I must have some very sexy bras and he'd like to see me in them.
I'm not interested in basically litigating something that is finished that makes my network look bad, okay? I'm not interested in making my network look bad at all. That doesn't interest me one bit.
Not unique, but the social media and the corporate media heighten everything.
Fame in broadcast news is built on routine. Familiar faces return at the same hour, in the same chair, speaking to millions as events unfold. But that visibility is fragile. Over time, some of the most recognized anchors in television history were suddenly removed from their roles after scandals, internal disputes, or breaks with their networks. What happens when those familiar names are no longer on screen? And where do they go when they disappear from the platform that defined them? Join us as we look at the famous news anchors who were fired and the different paths they took after it ended. Matt Lauer. For 2 decades, Matt Lauer was one of the most familiar faces in American morning television. As co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, he sat at the center of a broadcast that reached millions every morning. He was actively shaping headlines, interviewing presidents, and guiding viewers through breaking news with a calm, practiced presence. However, that image collapsed in November 2017. NBC News announced that Matt Lauer had been terminated following a formal complaint involving inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. The network stated that the complaint came from a colleague and that it was supported by what they described as a detailed review. Within hours, one of the most recognizable figures in television news was no longer on air. The fallout did not stop at a single complaint. In the days that followed, additional allegations surfaced from multiple women, some of whom described patterns of behavior stretching back years during his time at NBC. Reports later painted a broader picture of a workplace environment where power dynamics went unchecked, particularly at the height of his influence on Today. What had once been a carefully managed public image began to unravel in layers. However, Matt insisted that all his encounters were consensual and denied as categorically false the explosive allegation that he raped a coworker in 2014. NBC ended its relationship with him immediately. The separation was abrupt and final. On the same morning the news broke, his former co-anchors addressed his firing live on air. After his dismissal, Matt stepped out of public life. Unlike some television figures who attempt reinvention through interviews or digital platforms, he did not return to the media in any visible way. He did not launch a podcast, join another network, or participate in public commentary. His professional identity, built over decades inside NBC, effectively ended at that point. In the years that followed, he was rarely seen in public. Instead, he shifted into private life almost entirely, away from the visibility that had defined his public existence for more than 20 years. Now, he largely lives around the Hamptons and still maintains his relationship with Shaman Abbas, who often visits his home in the Hamptons. In a report, he claimed he was happy, despite being still angry with the way he was treated by the industry and people he thought were his friends. Part of that transition included significant changes to his personal circumstances. He sold his longtime Hamptons property for $40.9 million in June 2022, a residence that had become closely associated with his years at the top of morning television. The sale was widely reported as part of a broader step away from the public footprint he once maintained. Meanwhile, Matt Lauer's exit was only one side of the collapse. At Fox News, another primetime giant was next. Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly was one of the most dominant voices in cable news for more than a decade. As host of the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News, he built a program that consistently led ratings and shaped the tone of primetime political commentary in the United States. His on-air style was direct and combative. For years, that formula kept him at the top of the cable news landscape. But by 2017, that position began to collapse. In April of that year, Fox News ended its relationship with Bill after a series of reports revealed that he and the network had paid multiple settlements related to allegations of sexual harassment. The reports detailed that several women had received financial settlements over claims involving inappropriate conduct. Although Bill denied wrongdoing, the scale of the settlements and the public attention surrounding them placed sustained pressure on Fox News leadership. His departure was not framed as a gradual transition. It was a clear break from the network where he had spent years as its most influential primetime host. Once the decision was made, Fox News moved quickly to replace him, ending one of the most successful runs in cable news history. At the time of his exit, The O'Reilly Factor was not just another program in the lineup. It was a flagship show that had defined the network's identity in the evening slot. Its audience was large and consistent, built over years of repetition and a distinct editorial tone that blended opinion with political analysis. Losing that anchor created a visible shift in Fox News programming. After leaving Fox News, Bill did not return to mainstream cable television. For a figure who had once been central to national political discourse on television, the absence from cable news was noticeable. However, his public presence did not end entirely. Instead of disappearing, Bill moved into independent media. He launched No Spin News, a digital program distributed through his own platform. The format was familiar in structure, focused on political commentary and current events, but the distribution model was different. Beyond that, Bill remained active in public commentary through books, interviews, and digital programming. What changed most was the platform, not the voice. The reach of the O'Reilly Factor had once been national and institutional. After 2017, that reach became self-directed and digital, built around his own distribution channels rather than a network structure. His exit marked one of the most significant transitions in modern cable news because instead of fading completely, he rebuilt a media presence outside the system that originally made him a household name. However, another CNN anchor had already been removed years earlier after a controversy that ended his run on the network overnight. Rick Sanchez. Rick Sanchez built his career in broadcast journalism through fast delivery and a style that leaned heavily on personality-driven news. By the late 2000s, he had become one of CNN's more recognizable daytime figures, hosting Rick's List and appearing regularly across the network's programming lineup. However, that career came to a sudden end in October 2010. CNN fired Rick Sanchez after a series of controversial remarks he made during a radio interview. In those comments, he criticized comedian Jon Stewart and made claims that were widely condemned as offensive and anti-Semitic. He accused him of being a bigot and made sneering comments about American Jews as an oppressed minority. The backlash was immediate. Within a day, CNN announced that his employment had been terminated, ending his run at the network without any planned transition or on-air farewell. At the time of his firing, Rick was still actively hosting Rick's List. The program had given him a visible platform on CNN's daytime schedule, placing him within the network's rotating structure of news and commentary hosts. That position disappeared overnight once the decision was made to sever ties. The termination marked a sharp break in his presence on mainstream American television. Unlike some anchors who remain within the broader media ecosystem after leaving a major network, Rick's visibility dropped significantly in the years that followed. His name no longer appeared in the regular rotation of cable news programming, and his role in national broadcast journalism ended. Nevertheless, after leaving CNN, he attempted to remain in the media through smaller and less prominent outlets. He worked briefly with Fox News Latino, a short-lived initiative aimed at reaching Hispanic audiences, and later appeared on RT America, the US-based branch of the Russian state-funded network. These roles kept him in broadcast media, but they did not restore the level of visibility he once had at CNN. Next is another familiar cable news voice whose run ended after making a remark against a popular host, pushing him out of mainstream television altogether. Ed Schultz. Ed Schultz built his reputation in American media as a loud, direct voice in political commentary. Before television, he worked in radio, where his style sharpened into something unmistakable. That same energy carried into cable news, where he became one of the more visible progressive commentators on MSNBC. His program, The Ed Schultz Show, later known as The Ed Show, gave him a national platform during a period when cable news was increasingly shaped by opinion-driven formats. Ed positioned himself as a working-class voice in political media, often focusing on labor issues, economic inequality, and American politics through a populist lens. Unfortunately, in 2015, that chapter ended. MSNBC canceled Ed's show and suspended him for referring to radio talk show host Laura Ingraham as a right-wing slut and talk slut on his syndicated radio show on Tuesday. His departure marked the end of his run in mainstream American cable television. One moment he was part of the daily lineup, and the next he was no longer on MSNBC's schedule. After leaving the network, Ed did not return to major U.S. cable news. Instead, he moved into a different media environment that operated outside the traditional American broadcast system. He joined RT America, a U.S.-based network funded by the Russian government, where he hosted political programming that continued his focus on U.S. and international politics. The move placed him in a very different media context from the one he had worked in for years. While RT America provided a platform and audience reach, it was not part of the mainstream American cable news ecosystem. However, Ed remained active in broadcasting until his death. He died on July 5, 2018, at the age of 64. He suffered a heart attack at his home in Washington, D.C., while still working in broadcasting with RT America. His death came unexpectedly, ending a career that had moved from mainstream cable news into independent and alternative media spaces. However, not every exit was immediate or final. Some anchors did not leave in a single moment, but slowly faded through a series of decisions that changed their role over time. Brian Williams. Brian Williams spent years as one of the most trusted faces in American evening news. As anchor of NBC Nightly News, he stepped into one of the most visible roles in broadcast journalism, succeeding Tom Brokaw and carrying the broadcast into a new era of cable competition and digital news. For years, he delivered headlines from wars, disasters, and political turning points. That reputation changed in 2015. The turning point came after questions emerged about stories Brian had repeatedly told regarding his reporting during the 2003 invasion of Iraq. In his version of events, he had been aboard a military helicopter that came under fire and was forced to land. Military personnel who were present disputed that account, stating that Brian had not been in the helicopter that was hit, but in another aircraft that arrived later. The inconsistency triggered a wider investigation into his reporting history. Brian later acknowledged that his recollection of the Iraq incident had been inaccurate. NBC suspended him without pay for 6 months while conducting a formal review. As the review continued, additional questions were raised about other reports he had delivered, including accounts of Hurricane Katrina, where details he had shared were also challenged by others present at the scene. The investigation concluded that Brian had misrepresented aspects of his experiences in the field. The result was a major shift in his position at NBC News. He did not return to NBC Nightly News. Instead, the network reassigned him to MSNBC, where he eventually began hosting The 11th Hour, a late-night news program focused on political developments and breaking coverage. The move marked a clear change in status. From anchoring the flagship evening broadcast, he transitioned into a cable news role with a smaller audience. Despite the setback, Brian remained on air and continued working in broadcast journalism for several more years. The 11th Hour became his primary platform, and he maintained a steady presence on MSNBC's lineup through the late 2010s and into the early 2020s. In 2021, he left NBC entirely when his contract ended. That departure closed a long chapter of network television that had begun decades earlier and included some of the most visible moments in his career. After leaving NBC, Brian stepped away from the daily structure of television news. His public appearances became less frequent, and his role in mainstream broadcast journalism diminished significantly. However, in April 2026, Brian announced he would be hosting a weekly video podcast on Netflix titled We're Back with Brian Williams. The show features casual, extended interviews with pop culture figures and newsmakers. Outside of this, he has spent time with family as a grandfather and has volunteered as a firefighter. Not all exits came slowly or quietly. Some ended almost overnight, after a single controversy changed everything. Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly rose through the ranks of cable news to become one of the most visible figures in American television journalism. At Fox News, she built a reputation for sharp questioning, controlled delivery, and high-profile political interviews that often placed her at the center of national debates. Her primetime presence turned her into a familiar name beyond cable news audiences, especially during election cycles and major political coverage. In 2017, she left Fox News and joined NBC. This followed her explosive accusations that former Fox News chairman Roger Ailes had sexually harassed her earlier in her career. She also claimed that she didn't feel supported by the network. Eventually, she left for NBC, where she was positioned as a major hire in the network's effort to expand its morning programming. NBC gave her a high-profile platform with Megyn Kelly Today, a morning show designed to blend news, lifestyle segments, and interviews. The move marked a shift from her hard-edged cable news identity into a broader broadcast format aimed at a wider daytime audience. Her time at NBC, however, was short-lived. In October 2018, Megyn became the center of national controversy after comments she made during an on-air discussion about Halloween costumes and blackface. Her remarks were widely criticized across media and public platforms, triggering immediate backlash. The situation escalated quickly inside NBC, where the response to the segment led to internal review and public pressure. Within days, NBC canceled Megyn Kelly Today. Her show was removed from the network lineup, and her role at NBC ended. The decision marked a rapid collapse of what had been a major network transition just a year earlier. After her departure, Megyn exited traditional cable news entirely. She did not return to a network anchor role or take another position within mainstream broadcast television. Instead, she shifted her work into independent media, building a presence through digital platforms, podcasting, and online commentary. Even after leaving NBC, Megyn remained a recognizable voice in political and cultural commentary. Her media presence continued, but it no longer operated within the framework of mainstream network television that had defined the earlier stages of her career. Now, even in more recent years, another familiar voice has been pushed out of network television, proving the cycle is far from over. Don Lemon. Don Lemon built his career inside CNN over nearly 2 decades, becoming one of the network's most recognizable anchors. He covered breaking news, political developments, and major national events, eventually rising into primetime and later morning programming. By 2023, he was co-hosting CNN This Morning, a role that placed him at the center of the network's effort to rebuild its morning lineup. The show was positioned as a fresh start for CNN's daytime programming, blending news coverage with discussion-driven segments aimed at a broader audience. That chapter ended abruptly in April 2023. CNN announced it had parted ways with Don Lemon after internal tensions and public controversy tied to on-air remarks and workplace conduct concerns. The decision was confirmed as a termination, closing his long run with the network. Don said he was stunned, stating on social media that he was informed through his agent that his time at CNN had ended. The controversy followed comments he made on air suggesting that Republican Nikki Haley, then 51, was not in her prime, remarks that drew widespread criticism and intensified scrutiny of his role at the network. His exit marked an immediate break from CNN's programming. CNN This Morning ended his run without transition or a direct replacement for him, cutting short a position he had only recently stepped into. For a journalist who had spent years as one of CNN's most visible anchors, the departure was sudden, final, and highly public. After leaving the network, Don did not step away from the media. Instead, he moved into independent digital platforms, continuing his work through online distribution, social media, and self-produced content. He created The Don Lemon Show, which now has its own YouTube channel with approximately 1.25 million subscribers as of March 2026. His post-CNN work shifted into independent conversations, commentary, and interviews delivered directly to audiences without a network. This allowed Don Lemon to stay visible outside the traditional newsroom structure that once defined his career. Unlike some anchors who faded after leaving major networks, Don Lemon remained active in independent media. However, in January 2026, Don Lemon was arrested by federal agents in Los Angeles in connection with a protest at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. Authorities alleged he was involved in actions that disrupted a worship service during an anti-ICE demonstration, while Don Lemon maintained he was present in a journalistic capacity covering the event. He was later released on his own recognizance following a court appearance, with conditions placed on his movement and contact with other parties involved in the case. Were the reasons behind these firings serious enough to end decades-long careers? And once an anchor leaves a major network, is it truly hard to return, or do some simply choose not to? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.